All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at this really quick before we go ahead and do anything else. I'm going to take you guys to one of the green targets that we have here, the one that's the least used. You can see this guy. We're shooting at the head of this target. You have 4 bullet holes in that thing's head, and we're essentially going to kind of go from there, right? It's one of those things where it's like I'm recycling a target because we've been doing a bunch of shooting for an arrow precision review that's coming for the million of you that asked me. But we're going to talk about something else right now. So let's talk about some recoil control, right? I noticed this little trend in like the, not everybody, right? But there are some in like the YouTube world or whatever that talk about recoil control, and for the most part, they're just focusing on like the upper half of the body and a little bit of the legs and all that stuff, when it is a full circle type process. So let's talk about this, right? Now, here's the thing. When we're talking about recoil control, we can't really talk about recoil control, especially when you come out to class for us, without talking about fighting first, right? We ask this question all the time. Would you fight somebody knowing that you're probably going to get hit? Would you fight somebody like this? Okay, I mean, fully bladed off, the legs are way over here, right? Would you fight somebody like this? Would you throw a punch and deal with somebody like that? And if the answer is yes, well, what happens if he comes off of this way and then hits you? Right? You have no balance at that point. Or what if he sweeps out to this side and hits you? Now you're on your heels. So let's talk about that in the sense that there are a couple of things that we're going to really add on here, especially for like individual home defense and stuff, right? And we tend to not be exclusionary on techniques for any real reason, because we go into this philosophy at our classes and within our curriculum that every set of techniques that's ever been devised under a certain set of circumstances is the shit. Like, it's the best thing that's ever been developed, right? Under a slightly different set of circumstances, those same techniques are garbage, right? For instance, there is, when I came into the Army, the following was always a thing, right? You wanted good posture like so, until we started talking about body armor, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. You wanted good posture like so. You were fairly bladed, right? Fairly, not crazy, but you were fairly bladed. And they never really put that much of an emphasis on where the stock was. So here's the problem with that, right? And this is a older style of PMI type training, right? And it's kind of persisted itself, and we still see it today, where if we're bladed like so, you can see the top end of the stock where your recoiling parts are traveling into is going over the top of your shoulder. Now, here's the thing, is that when we start shooting like that, the gun's going to start climbing like so. Now, just looking at some body posture, right? And I'm not going to be doing any leaning into it or anything like that. Just looking at some body posture, let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like when we do a little bit of shooting with that posture, right? It's good and set up. Hand is nice and comfortably placed underneath the thing. Good and bladed. Now let's go ahead and turn loose on that dude's brain box. Okay. Now, let's go take a look, right? As you can see, the shot group is starting to drift toward the left, and it's starting to drift high to the point where there's a miss. Now, here's the thing about that, right? As far as that is concerned, what we're looking at here is really a physics issue, right? And that physics issue is as follows. If you give energy a place to go, it will go there. So I gave that energy a place to go by popping this over the top of my shoulder, bringing the rifle to my eyes rather than my eyes to the rifle. We'll talk about that here in a bit too. But I was bringing the rifle to my eyes, not my eyes to the rifle for the most part. And as I started to shoot, I'm bladed off this way, and my recoiling parts are coming over the top of my shoulder. And 5.56 doesn't recoil hard. But just standing here, it starts to climb the gun this way because you're giving the energy a place to go, right? Now, where this comes into play as far as a really big and positive thing is if we're trying to take a longer distance shot, right? It's one of those deals where I'm not going to bear down on the gun real hard and lean into it and get a good and positive grip or a posture on it if I'm trying to shoot in the standing at 300 yards. That's just not what I'm going to do. There's too much movement in here. There's too much tension in there. And a lot of this is kind of bred from distance target shooting, where if I want to shoot a target farther away, okay, I want less human input rather than more, because more adds to tension, and that tension adds to a shake and all of that, right? So a lot of times we're just going to sit here and shoot like so because it's nice and comfortable. And you can actually take it a step further, use your own gear or your hips or whatever to essentially platform the gun out like so, and we can take a target shooting approach to shooting farther away, to where now we're nice and stable in the fact that we're using bone support rather than muscles. We can stay in this position essentially all day with no real vibration whatsoever, and we can shoot farther and more accurately because the gun is essentially just kind of laying on our bodies, right? And that helps out quite a bit as far as just being able to handle placing an accurate shot farther away. Well, up close, a different set of circumstances, we run into problems because, especially in individual self-defense or even military or LEO, you're still accountable for every round that you fire, right? And as we could see, it starts to drift to the left and then up. And if you're right-handed, it's the opposite. It starts to drift to the right and then out and away because you're giving the energy a place to go. So let's talk about a little bit of passive stuff that we can do, stuff that's already there that we don't have to add any input into first, right? And this is just good body posture as far as that whole thing is concerned. Now, imagine that same question about fighting somebody. Only difference now is that we've got the weight in our feet, or our legs, rather, spread out just enough, not to where it's like overextended, right? But just enough to where if I have to make a quick movement in a direction, I can go ahead and do that without having to, like, if it's real wide, have to set and then go somewhere. We want that weight distributed to the point where it's right here, to where if I have to make a quick movement left or right, I can do that without setting my body again. So we want this right about here or wherever it's comfortable for you. Some guys it's closer together, some guys it's just a little bit further. It depends on your build. But you want them just far enough to where I can essentially, kind of jump out left or right without having any additional movement to do in my legs. So from there, we kind of have these guys, about yay apart. Next thing is our feet. We want the weight in the balls of our feet rather than in our heels, because if we give energy a place to go, it's going to go there. And if you start on your heels, you'll knock yourself off balance real easily. So from there, we have about this posture as far as our hips and stuff are concerned. The next thing that we're going to do here is we're going to orient our hips as best as we can in line with what it is that we're trying to shoot. Mostly because if I have to turn someplace, I'm still going to orient my hips there. Or right, I'm going to do my best to orient my hips, mostly because there's less tank turreting to do, and there's essentially less for you to focus on. So we want our hips oriented as forward as we can get them, and then we can essentially take our core and tighten it up when we're getting ready to shoot up close, mostly because our core is sort of the center of our balance. We want to tighten that up, get a good flex in there, so that anything that we're doing, we're essentially trying to brick wall things from here up. Because from here up, this is where all the action's happening. This is where all the recoil mitigation and stuff is happening, but we want a good base to where if we get hit, slip, whatever, we can compensate from it and then keep going. So we're good and tight. We're good and tight here. We got our hips oriented a little more forward. We got good balance now. And now as far as the gun is concerned, it's essentially, here's your guard. It's nice and tight, keeping people from punching you in the face. We're oriented towards what it is that we're planning on shooting. The only difference now is right here. And that's all it is. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to add nothing else to this. And you guys are going to watch what happens when I start firing a couple of rounds. And I'll even start to speed it up a little bit, but we'll start slow. Watch what happens to my body when it receives some of this recoil. And because of that posture that I have, Watch what happens after the recoiling parts essentially slam into my body, right? This is all a physics thing. So, pay attention to what's going on with the body. What's going on with the body? Check it out. Got a good posture, set up good. Now, you may have noticed a little bit of a seesaw thing happening here, to where as my body receives a recoil, it kind of leans itself forward. Now, we can get away with a lot of stuff doing this, and we can even start to speed up just a little bit. And now we can see the difference between what was going on when we were bladed and what was happening when we had a good posture that had a good natural forward lean to it, in that the shot group didn't take itself someplace else. It was good and centered the entire time. So now let's talk about a couple of active measures, because if we're trying to shoot faster, right, if whatever it is that's threatening our lives and our family's lives is up close, chances are you're going to shoot a little bit faster, right? So let's take some things that may have a little bit of controversy wrapped around them, and let's turn this to our benefit. Now, we see this all the time, especially in pistol classes, and in pistol classes this is really big because it's where it's most needed usually. In that when a lot of times we're talking about delivering an accurate shot, even though a lot of times it's not specified, we're just talking about accuracy. I believe that to be a slightly separate process of being incredibly precise and accurate versus some things that can happen while you're fighting, especially up close. But we talk about this, right? A lot of times the lecture that was talked about as far as posture and all that is covered. Most of the time it's covered really good, and this is where I see it starting to be an issue a lot of the time, as far as this talk is concerned. Now, we hear about, this posture and stuff like that with the gun out, and we start talking about pre-ignition grip, where dudes start over-torquing the pistol, and what is talked about a lot are these two fingers, right? Or just the whole hand, which is mostly inaccurate, but we start talking, for the most part, with these two fingers, right? Now, if I'm using these two fingers on both hands and I increase the tension on them, you can see what happens to the gun rather dramatically. Now, the reason why these fingers are talked about is because you can add the most torque in your hand on these two fingers, because essentially where one tries to go, the other one tries to follow. Okay, a lot of times it's kind of difficult for people to get independent movement of their digits like that. So because these try to move together all the time, you add a lot of torque, because most of your digits act independently of each other, right? So when we start to grip up the gun, we see a lot of that happening, right? And a lot of times we get the pre-ignition push talk, where a dude will pull a guy out and he'll stand in front of him and he'll start talking to the class while he just jabs a dude in the shoulders like this, right? And as he starts getting jabbed, in the middle of that jab, he'll stop and that dude will lean forward. And he'll talk about those two things as a negative thing always, with regards to pistol shooting. I believe this needs to die. And there's a lot of good guys out there, like both on YouTube and in the training industry, that cite and understand this difference. Because if we're trying to place a very deliberate, very accurate shot at sometimes absurd distances or on really small target areas, this is absolutely important. It really is. Because under that circumstance, we have to have as little tension in our body as possible. We have to release that tension in the shoulders, not grip the gun, but just hang on to the gun, right? And then from that point, we're doing the rest of our fundamentals: sight alignment, sight picture, really good trigger control, that kind of thing. And if we're placing a ridiculously accurate shot, and not ridiculous in a bad way, I mean like in the good way, I mean if we're trying to place a real accurate shot, top edge of the front sight post, and that's all we got, right? So with that minimized tension and all that stuff, what we are likely to do more of is concentrate just on this, and that delivers an extremely accurate shot if done correctly. Now, when we're talking about a subject that is in your face, that's up close, this set of circumstances slightly alters what we're trying to do at this point. because if I'm this close to you, right, you're not going to worry about cloverleafing rounds. What you're probably going to do is you're trying to shoot as much as you can to get me off of you if I'm the bad guy, right? So, to that effect, and there are only a couple other guys that I've seen really talk about this, like on YouTube and stuff. There's a lot of trainers that talk about it. But with that circumstance in mind, this pre-ignition grip and push is all good. It's all good. The only thing that we don't really want to do is snatch the trigger really, really, really hard. We do want to ride the reset over and over again. And that's mostly for an efficiency thing. There's less movement to do. It's more consistent so that our shot groups aren't this wide. They're this wide instead. And if they're this wide instead on a torso, then you're fine, right? Different circumstances dictate different actions. So let's get a little bit of that pre-ignition grip and push and all that on a rifle and see what it does. Now, as far as grip on a rifle is concerned, it's slightly different in that we're not just using those two fingers. What we can do is we can take our whole hand and, rather than trying to use the forearm to yank the gun into place, this is why I like a lot of foregrips, a lot of different types of foregrips. What we can do is that we can essentially put that torque into the hand, into the grip itself. And you can even see that there's a little bit of passive tension in there, and I'm not yanking back with my arm at all. You can see it this way, okay? All I'm doing is hanging onto the grip. That's all that is. So with that, and with a little bit of pre-ignition push, we can control the recoil a lot better, and with some training, we can get those shot groups really, really tight, like so. Right? You can see that the gun is controlled quite well. So with that being a thing, as far as just things to practice, things to consider, different circumstances to understand, right, we are less absolute. And when you're less absolute, you broaden your horizons, make yourself more well-rounded, all of that stuff. So, with that being said, guys, if you would like to come out here and take some training with us, that would be great. If you want training on your rifle, pistol, we have a shotgun class coming up in September out in Louisiana. We got a low light only pistol 1 class that doesn't have to where there's no prerequisites for it. You can come out and do that. I would highly suggest it, especially with the times that we are living in currently, right? And that bears no real need for an explanation, because individual self-defense is becoming more and more paramount as of late. So, our full price for classes is already pretty good when you compare it to the industry at $200 per 2-day class. But if you want to train with us really cheap, you can sign up for $35 a month on the Patreon page that we have. And so long as you sign up for that $35 a month thing, you can train with us as many courses as you want for as long as you want, so long as you're signed up to it. And I'll leave links in the description below for both our website and the Patreon thing, so you guys can peruse what's going on down there. We also constantly update what's going on with the site, so chances are, and we travel all over, so chances are we're coming to you. For those of you who don't want to jump on the $35 a month bandwagon for Patreon, I get it. I completely understand. What ends up happening at that point is if you want to donate through Patreon in any other way, it could be like a nickel. It doesn't matter. It goes a lot farther than you realize, mostly because the vast majority of that money goes straight to soldiers that we pull and train for free, like, free flight, ammo. Sometimes we supply gear and all that stuff. And we bring them out and we train them based off of the money that you guys donate to us. So there's that. A couple announcements that I do have to make. If you're a school resource officer within any capacity, there is a little bit of a verification process. I'm not just, people are that way sometimes. But if you're a school resource officer, after a little bit of a verification process, meaning I'll probably need, what your current post is. I'll probably need a couple of references, that kind of thing. we'll figure it out. But if you're a school resource officer anywhere in the country and you believe that your department isn't dishing out the correct training, and in most cases they are not, you are permitted to train with me tuition free forever. Okay. I'm also adding on to this because my director of training decided to make a decision without me, but it was a good one. If you are a teacher that was either selected or volunteered to be someone who carries on campus, right? Obviously, again, there is a verification process for this, but if you are a teacher that is interested in some training, again, you are permitted to train with me forever for nothing as far as tuition is concerned. Now, you're bringing your bullets, both the cops and the teachers, because I'm sorry, I can't go bankrupt. I have an infant son, but if you want to come out and seek training from us, you're not going to see a price tag for me as far as a tuition is concerned. And I've handed out some free training in the past, and a lot of guys have felt bad about it, to where they're just kind of like, man, you just started a company, I don't want to take money from you, and all that stuff. Don't feel bad about it, ever. Okay, if you want to send money my way, bring friends. Okay, like that's how I'm gonna handle that. That's it. You know, if not, I'm not seeking money from your friends because I offered something free to you. You see what I'm saying? It's offered. Take the opportunity and run with it. It's as simple as that. You don't get many of them in life. So there you go. If you want to join the discussion page on Facebook, we can go ahead and do that as well. There's a lot of good discussions going on there, especially with current times. A lot of funny stuff goes on too. So we're growing, and we're getting more and more positive feedback from different people. So it is what it is there. But really, that's all I got on this little video, guys. Remember, the regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Be easy.